Okay, so today we're very fortunate to have Noemi with us. This is the first in our series of videos introducing Miyazawa artists, so it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
We just thought we'd kind of introduce you to the people out there and just talk about you and what you've been up to.
Wonderful.
And a little bit of a history maybe as well.
Brilliant.
So if we start off with the first question for you. How did you get into flute playing and what's your kind of musical history, your teachers and where did you study?
So I began when I was quite young. I began with the recorder when I was still in kindergarten. And I'm from Hungary, so I studied in Hungary at first with Ilona Kárász, who was a wonderful teacher. Actually, she educated many professional flutists, which I wasn't aware at the time, but it was very obvious that she's a wonderful teacher. And then I continued my studies at the Bartók Conservatory. Yeah. Which was a specialized school for high school students in classical music. Yeah. Prior to that, I was lucky enough to spend a year in Japan where I worked with Laurent Kovács, who was the professor of the Liszt Academy at the time, but working in Japan at the Musashi Music Academy in Tokyo. And then I was studying for a year at Stanford Music Center with Frances Blaisdell, which was very influential because some of you might know that she was the first female solo flutist of the New York Philharmonic, and actually the first female flutist as well to be accepted at Juilliard School. Yeah. So she was someone who really made history.
Real trailblazer.
Yes, yeah. and so that was very inspiring to me. Yeah. And after my studies at the conservatory in Budapest, I continued at the Liszt Academy. And then I went on to do postgraduate studies in Vienna with Barbara Gieslerhase and a soloist diploma with András Adorján in Munich. Okay, right. So I had quite a varied background in my education, and I'm still in a sense learning. Although obviously as a flutist I'm teaching and playing, mostly performing. But I'm just about to complete my doctorate in flute performance at the Royal Academy of Music, which is exciting because I'm the first flutist to do that at the Academy. Yeah. So that I think will be probably the last and final step in my education, so to say.
That's great. And how have you found that kind of going into that project in the last kind of couple of years? It's been you're coming to the end of it now, or you've just finished. What was the actual end result? And it must be a huge sense of achievement.
Well, I haven't just finished. I'm going to submit my thesis, but the artistic portfolio is finished. Okay. The project I've been working on is called the Classical Flute and Guitar Project, and the main focus of the project was to create new musical translations for flute and guitar from keyboard compositions of Haydn, Mozart and Beethoven. Yeah. And I've worked on these together with Katalin Koltai, guitarist, who has been my duo partner for actually over 15 years. So these translations have been created together with her. And then of course I was studying the currently available transcriptions and actually the importance of this canonic repertoire, from which we flutists have quite little of, and what it means to interpret this music and what it means in the eyes of program promoters, let's say, or even fellow instrumentalists. And it has been a very, very interesting creative process actually to look at a creative idea from so many different aspects. Obviously, when I plan my concerts, I usually like to work with pieces that are in some ways unusual, or I anyway like to create transcriptions and look into works that others might not play. So I enjoy learning about those kind of things, but because this was really mainstream repertoire, and putting my hand on that was something really extraordinary. And now we have all the music published by Doblinger, which is beautiful because it's a wonderful publishing house linked to Vienna. And we just published Transforming Tradition, which which includes all the transcriptions, the recording of all the transcriptions, and I find it really exciting that the reviews are coming in now.
Yeah.
And I feel now a bit even anxious that they are so positive. I mean, they are just so positive that I didn't expect this to be so unanimously positive, and wonderful platforms have written about it. Many radios have played it, including actually BBC Three and various other classical radios around the world, actually.
Yeah.
So it's really, really wonderful.
That's hugely exciting, and what we'll do is we'll put as link to as many of those things that you mentioned in the actual video as well, so people can actually check it out and
yes,
download.
Please do.
Download it to support our Miyazawa artists. That's great. What's most people are interested in as well is everybody's intrigued, you know, people's kind of playing setups and the actual instrument you play. So maybe if you could just talk about your instrument and how long you've played it and what the actual materials are and your kind of take on that.
How long have I played this flute for? That's a good question. So I currently play on a Miyazawa Boston flute, which is a 14-karat flute. Golden flute with platinum plated keys, and it has a B-foot joint as well, so it's a very powerful instrument, quite a heavy instrument, which I like because it feels like it has a very proper body to it, and I feel wonderful playing it. I use a left-hand head joint, which is a 14-karat head joint, and I've been using this combination now for, let me think, probably nearly 10 years actually, so quite a while. Somehow I in every aspect of life, I tend to stick to things, so I like to develop things in the long run, both musically, meaning in my chamber music work. I have long ongoing working relationships, and I haven't played many instruments in my life either, because I feel like once I made the decision, I very much like to work with that material and just make the most out of it. So those are the details of the actual instrument. And then of course, the more exciting part is actually how you make use of that every day, and how you use the opportunities in different concert settings and repertoire and so on.
Because you play a huge variety of music, and also in terms of the position that you play. So you're a famous soloist. You've done a lot of orchestral playing, and as you say, you've done lots of chamber music as well. So you obviously find that your flute is very versatile, that it can encompass all of those roles for you.
I think that was something extremely important to me when I decided on what kind of instrument to play. I was just talking about this flute and guitar project, which you can imagine requires a very intimate style of playing at times, not always, but at times, yes. And then the other end of the spectrum is really, let's say, Iber concerto or a contemporary concerto with huge orchestra where you really have to come through. So I needed an instrument which is able to do both. And I often felt trying various other combinations or other instruments that either a flute was really projecting wonderfully, so I felt very comfortable playing solistic repertoire, but then I struggled to find a variety of colors, let's say, in an extreme piano setting. Whereas with this instrument, I think that's what I love the most. But I feel that, of course, it takes a lot of effort, and you have to really work in detail with the sound colors and the techniques that you apply to make them come to life. But with this Miyazawa flute, I feel that that I'm absolutely able to create what I hear inside and what I imagine, which is a huge thing. And I feel that over the course of the years, as I use the instrument and as I am able to control this to a higher and higher level, the beautiful thing is that it resonates in the critiques and reviews that I get.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean necessarily that as an artist you have to rely on the reviews, but I think when you see that chronologically, or when I see the words that certain reviewers may use, or let's say other musicians or someone from the public who comes to me after a concert,
yeah.
I do see a tendency in that, which is wonderful, because it makes me feel that it's worth doing, and that it works what I imagine to do with the instrument. So that's I think something which is very exciting.
Yeah. And just looking back on your career so far, I mean, you've got a very long way to go, but have you got any kind of musical highlights or concerts that specifically stick out maybe in your memory? There must be so many, but it's something that you really feel very proud of, or was really inspirational.
That's an interesting question. I will mention two that just popped in my mind, because of course there are many and many that are important from a different aspect. But I think the two that I would say, one was the first time when I played Tosca in the Vienna State Opera.
Yeah.
I think that was influential, because I had to do that with absolute top musicians, members of the Vienna Philharmonic, without any rehearsal, and I didn't have much experience playing operas at the time, so it was a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And it felt amazingly empowering that I could do it, and not only that, but that the colleagues were extremely supportive, and I think that was just a huge boost for me somehow. That made me really motivated, and that kind of support as well, I think.
Yeah.
I felt that is something that was very meaningful.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And the other is a very recent, or quite recent performance. So just this September, I was playing Ebert's concerto 4 times in a row with the orchestra, and it was quite a special moment, because my husband was conducting, and we don't tend to play so much together, so we were both of us very hard, but we tend to have our own paths, and this time we were playing together. He is actually also a trained classical flutist, so he has a master's. So he knows the piece in and out. And the last performance was in the Palace of Arts in Budapest, which is the biggest concert hall, and I think that was just a huge experience to play this piece there, and by that time I felt that I knew it so well, which is wonderful, because that's what I again enjoy a lot, when I'm able to play huge repertoire pieces several times, and I can feel that I really begin to own it.
Yeah.
So that was also an amazing experience, because I've been dreaming to play that concerto for a long time, and it was one of the exceptions that I never played with orchestra. So the majority of the big repertoire works I've done a couple of times already. So that was something that was really meaningful this season, actually.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So another thing that people ask, which would be great to get your take on as well, is how to choose a flute and what kind of to look out for. You know, if you're advising a student or a friend or whatever, what pointers would you give them? When they go through this process.
Yes, this is always a question, and I often get asked by my own students or other professionals. I think I would first of all say take your time, so don't rush yourself.
Yeah.
Obviously, when one has the opportunity to buy an instrument,
Yeah.
we all want an instrument instantly, and we are so excited that it's sometimes difficult to be patient. But I think it is worth really taking the time and trying different instruments.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to know what you want to use the instrument for and what are the things that you personally as an artist find important.
Yeah.
Important values or important qualities, because that makes, I mean, once you know that clearly, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah.
What you want to look for, and then obviously play the instrument, but keeping in mind that when you first take an instrument in your hand, the result that you get is not something that you'll get a year later or 2 years later.
Yeah.
So it's just the beginning. And I think especially young players tend to choose something which works instantly, wonderfully.
Yeah.
And that might be really great for some time, but especially when you invest in a more serious instrument, I think it's very, very important to think about the growth that you can produce over the years.
Yeah.
And something that might work in that moment wonderfully might not be the one instrument that you can really, really improve together with in the long run. So I think that is something important to consider.
Yeah.
And I think when you can have someone there with you who can also give feedback, listening from the outside, that can also help a lot, because oftentimes we have a feeling which we then concentrate on.
Yeah.
And it's more difficult to actually compare how the instrument sounds from the outside.
Yeah.
And one more tip. I think once you have something that you really like, I think it's always worth trying it in a larger space.
Yeah.
Because again, that's something very important, how the instrument is able to carry.
Yeah.
And when we try it in a practice space, of course what you will hear there is vastly different from what you then hear in, let's say, a concert hall.
Great. So another question I like to ask people is what are your kind of musical influences? And they don't have to be necessarily flute related, it could be anything, or even popular music or whatever. But is there something that you listen to, or some artists that you really enjoy that kind of take you to another place or inspire you in your own practice or whatever else?
Does it need to be musical reference or anything
really?
life?
Yeah, anything really.
Well, I think in general, I think I take a lot of inspiration from athletes, actually.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy reading interviews or watching interviews with athletes.
Yeah.
Because it always inspires me to be even more persistent.
Yeah.
And I love the risk taking that I think one needs to have as an athlete, because if you want to really succeed, you always have to take the extra risk.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I find extremely important in my life and in my art history.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that a lot. And in general, this is true for any kind of music. So I usually like to listen to anything which just goes one step beyond, where I can feel that the idea behind is something that others, let's say, didn't so far discover, or that person was pushing things a bit further, and that could be really anything from popular music to, let's say, Jordi Savall.
Yeah.
So it's a big variety of things, and I in general enjoy this kind of variety in life, so I will taste all sorts of foods. I like to know how they are prepared, or I like to know these details about them. I enjoy reading books, obviously. Sometimes during working on my thesis, I had little time to actually enjoy literature, so that's something that I look forward to in the next coming year and months and everything, that I can have a little more time to read literature for pleasure, which is not related to my profession. So I think these are the things that influence me a lot, or even just reading stories about anyone, an average person and their life story, how they could turn something around, or how with their curiosity they found something new, because I think these are the things that bring things forward in life.
Absolutely.
And so those always make me think and make me motivated and just help me also keep working extremely focused and also help me to define my goals better and better in general. So I think that would be the answer.
It's a great answer.
And also probably my family, because I think I'm lucky to have very special people surrounding me, and that is a huge power which is present in my everyday life. So that is an addition to all of that.
Great. Well, that's a really nice way to wrap up. I'd just like to thank Noemi for coming in and
talking
to us
and
telling us about her career and her life and her aspirations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening.